Welcome to the Own Your Life podcast, where our goal is to help bring hope, healing, and peace by sharing our experiences and inspiring you to own your life. Hey everyone, welcome back to the Own Your Life podcast. Today, it's just going to be me. Matt is traveling, but I am here with Elizabeth Meyers, and she is amazing. She is a wife, a homeschooling mom, a veteran. Thank you for your service. An author, speaker, coach, and more. From boots to bottles, this Air Force graduate and homeschooling mom of 8 teaches us how to have more hope, healing, and peace in our lives, and how to overcome adversity when it seems the battle is lost. Welcome to the On Your Life podcast.
Thanks. Thank you for having me on. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about your background.
Yeah, well, you covered a lot of it there really quickly, but yeah, we're a big family. We've got 8 kids, and we say only 6 are still at home. Our oldest 2 have flown the nest. And we're a military family, so we have moved a lot over the last 25 years. My husband's just recently retired from the Air Force, so we are settling down out in Texas, which is where I'm from originally. And so we're just really happy to kind of be getting settled into a new routine. And I'm able to kind of ramp up my writing and speaking and various things that I'm doing now as the kids are older. And, as my husband's job is shifting around. So it's just a really neat season. We're excited about what's next, even though we don't really know what that looks like. But we say, we've just had a great adventure over the last 25 years of our marriage, and we are looking forward to the next adventure and whatever that holds.
Awesome. What are some of your favorite places that you've lived since you move around so much?
Yeah, we get asked that question a lot, and honestly, they've all been great. I really believe that everything is what you make of it. And we have enjoyed every place to the fullest. We go and see what that place has to offer, for our family, depending on the ages of our kids at the time and stuff like that. And we just go out and do it and experience it. And, there's grumpy people at every place we've lived that, oh, we hate it here. But they're the people that don't get out and ever do anything. We've lived in Alaska and we loved it. And, I knew a spouse who was just miserable there, but it's because she never left her house. So I really think, it's kind of a bloom where you're planted mentality. If we had to kind of pick one family favorite, I think it was Idaho. And really, it was just more because we were there for 4.5 years. Okay. And it was a really small local community. So we really got connected to people who, live there all the time. In the military community, you only know people for about 2 years because either you move or they move. Yep. But when you're 4.5 years in one spot and you connect with people in the community, it's like there's people we knew for 4 years. So it felt, kind of more like family. Our 2 youngest kids were both born there. And so, for the longest time, they thought that was home. They kept asking me, Mom, when are we going to move back home? And I'm like, well, A, Idaho's not home anymore. And B, I don't think we are. So it took a while for that to process in their little brains.
That's awesome. Yeah, Matt and I have moved around. It actually has been every 2 years since we got married. We're not a military family, but it almost feels like it. But it's the same mentality that, it's going to be what you make of it, wherever you are. We lived in Fayetteville, North Carolina for 2 years. And I'm not sure if you lived there in one of the times you were
sick. We lived in Goldsboro. So it's near there.
Yep. Yeah. So, we made the best of wherever we were, and we just moved to Tampa almost 2 months ago. So same kind of thing, just getting out there and doing stuff and really exploring because we love that. So that's great. Yeah. Cool. So where in Texas are you?
We're in Northeast Texas, kind of up in the eastest corner, gotcha. near Texarkana, but not. We're kind of out in the country a little. It's always been like my secret dream to have chickens and stuff. So we do. We bought our little fluffy chicks this spring. They're not laying eggs yet, but it's been fun. It's amazing how fun it is just to watch birds do their bird things. They're quite entertaining.
That's awesome. Did you guys get hit by the snowstorm?
So we moved here that week.
Wow.
It had already snowed and we were trying to drive through Louisiana in the middle of a snow. So yeah, it was this huge adventure. I ran off the road at one point. our camper, which my husband was pulling with our Suburban, it popped a tire.
Oh no.
You know, we were going to drive it all in one day. We wound up taking 2 days and spending the night in this frozen campsite. You know, we were all like shivering. And of course, we're trying to move with all the pets, right? So we have hermit crabs, we have fish, cat and a dog. Sadly, our hermit crabs didn't make it. They're not cold weather campers, I guess. I really, I had a little heater and I tried to keep them warm, but it just wasn't enough. But
yeah. Dang.
So it was quite the adventure.
Exciting. That keeps it fun though. And you have memories and stories.
Oh,
and
yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Well, cool. Well, so I read your book, Undefeated, and I know that's, mainly what we're going to be talking about today. Would you like to share with the audience, what was your inspiration for writing that?
Yes, definitely. So it was my 6th pregnancy. I lost the baby in the 2nd trimester. It was just a really traumatic situation. I mean, it is anytime a person that you love dies, but just the way it happened and everything was also very traumatic. We were away from home. We were on vacation, and there were just a lot of factors. And I got stuck in this place of grief. Our culture doesn't really know how to grieve the passing of a child that hasn't been born yet. And, people just kind of expect you to move on, but I couldn't move on. And I was like, what's wrong with me? And I really struggled with a lot of doubts and questions. I'm a person of faith, but I just really struggled with, where's God in all this? Just the age old questions that everybody asks of, how could a good God allow this level of suffering? And why does it seem so arbitrary? And, all these different things. So I really struggled. And looking back, I went through a period of about 5 years where I had untreated depression.
Wow.
Part of the time I didn't know it. I didn't know what was wrong with me. And, then there's also this trying to pretend like I'm okay. I kind of got the message from other people of, oh, you should move on. You should be over this by now. So I tried to do that. I tried to move on, and I just couldn't. So long story short, I finally, the pain of staying the same exceeded the pain of making changes. And I'm like, something has got to change. And I didn't know how to fix it. I'd just been praying, just wanted God to take it away. And he didn't. And so that's kind of my main message I want to give today. It's the Own Your Life podcast. And there's lots of times when we would just love for that difficult thing to be taken away.
Absolutely.
But sometimes there's a better plan for us, that we need to walk through things. There's things we got to own, problems that we need to deal with. And I had not been taking care of myself, as a mom of 8, self-care was non-existent, and really I just had to learn that self-care is not selfish, that if I'm going to take care of all these little people, I've got to take care of me first.
Yes.
And that felt to me unchristian. It's like, oh, we're supposed to take care of other people first. But, when Jesus says, love your neighbor as yourself, you got to love yourself first. Right. You got to receive his love first before you have anything to give. And so it was just very gradually, just a little baby step at a time in various areas of my life, mentally and emotionally and spiritually and physically, where I just made little changes that were just, little doable things. And over time, I gradually worked through a healing process through all these things. And I was journaling. It was actually something my counselor had recommended, because I would have some really bad days where I was really depressed and I could not imagine any reason to hope at all. And then I would have other days where I was okay. And I was like, why am I so upset by this still? Yeah. And so she told me, when you're having a good day, write to your depressed self what you want to remember. So that's what I started writing. Well, 3/4 of the way through the notebook, I'm like, I think this could be a book. I think there's other people out here who are struggling like this and who could benefit from these things that I'm learning. And so, I didn't know what I was getting into. I'm like, yeah, I'll write a book. So I was learning as I was going. It took me 3 years to get the book out, because I was just kind of making it up as I went along. And it wound up to be too huge of a book. So I chopped it up into 3. And so the second book, Undaunted, is coming out later this year. Awesome. But that one just kind of deals with those 5 areas of mental, emotional, spiritual, physical, and then will, or our motivation to do those things, and how those are all integrated, how they're all important, how they play off of each other, and just how we can build strength in all of those areas. And that increases our resiliency. It increases our ability to overcome adversity, and then to get out there and do that thing in life that we were born to do. Yeah. Because when we're in a hurting and broken place, which we all are at times, we can't really be in that place of serving others. So as we own our own pain, and as we work on healing that, then we're able from that place to help others. And so I think, that's ultimately the goal. The point is, God loves to bless us, but I don't think he ever blesses us just so we'll be blessed. He wants us to use those blessings to be a blessing to others. And so that's what I'm trying to do with my ministry, with speaking and writing and everything. And, I want to encourage others to do the same.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Yeah. And if you see me looking down, I'll be referring to notes, because I took quite a few notes while I was reading. I want to make sure I touch on some points.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
And I thought it was interesting in the beginning when you referred to the loss of your son, that the people around you, whether it was nurses or doctors, were just calling it a product of conception. They weren't even they weren't even saying it was a human being. And the fact that, when we dehumanize something, it's almost like it gives us an excuse just to dismiss it.
Right. Yeah. I felt very much that way. Like they were not acknowledging my right to grieve, because they're like, no life ever existed. And I understand kind of the point where they're coming from. A lot of times, especially in an earlier miscarriage, it might be difficult to tell this is baby and this is placenta or different. But my experience was more like a stillbirth. I mean, he was born.
Yeah.
And then it was only after that I began to bleed and other things happened. So, I mean, I brought, this tiny little perfect baby to the hospital. He's very clearly human in every way, just too small to live. And they just refused to humanize him in any way. And that was very hurtful to me. And that was a thing that I had to work through, of forgiving them. It was very painful to me at the time. And one of the most painful parts of this whole thing was they wouldn't let me have his body back. So I was never able to have any kind of burial or ceremony for him. The hospital took care of that. They burned him, or cremated him, and spread the ashes in a garden, but parents weren't allowed to go to that ceremony.
Interesting.
So that was all just really hurtful for, it's just one thing on top of another. Yeah. And because he was under 20 weeks, so I guess 20 weeks is kind of their cutoff of where the baby becomes human or something in their mind from a medical standpoint. So there was they didn't issue a death certificate because he was too young. And I just really felt like, in order to defend other women's right to choose, they were kind of stripping me of my right to grieve.
Yeah.
And I realized they're a secular hospital. There's things that they have to deal with.
Right.
But I just felt like, as a mom with a child that I loved, I should be allowed to mourn his passing. Right. And I just really didn't feel like I was.
Yeah. Yeah, that's got to be devastating. And how did your family, react during that time?
All my kids were younger, so they didn't really totally get what was going on. One of my daughters kind of struggled with it a little, ongoing. And that really broke my heart, because I was like, I don't know how to deal with this. I don't know how to help you deal with this. Right. Fortunately, she had a Sunday school teacher that she felt comfortable with, and she opened up to her a little bit. And that lady, because she was a little bit more removed from the pain than I was able to help her and minister to her in ways that I couldn't at that time. I just wasn't able to. So that, as far as the children go, my biggest impact there was just continuing to care for them when I felt really bad. Yeah. And I was kind of in this catch-22, because in order to heal physically, there was a huge aftermath after he was born. A whole bunch of things happened, and I was really anemic for a long time. So I needed to rest, really, to heal. But then that was bad for me mentally, to stay in bed, and because I was struggling with depression. I was struggling with the will to go on. And so for my mental health, I really needed to get up and, re-engage in life and get out there. But physically, I just couldn't do it. And so it was just this really hard place to try to balance all of that. Was challenging. But I really believe, it was those 5 little kids depending on me. That's what got me out of bed in the morning. That's what kept me going. If they hadn't been there, if they didn't need me as much as they did, I think I would have been even worse off. They're the ones that kept me going. Yeah. And, a lot of people look at me and go, oh, you've got 8 kids, you're crazy. Don't they drive you nuts and whatever? And I'm like, you know what? it's not the 8 kids I have. It's the one that I lost that has left the biggest hole in my heart. The ones that I have are the thing that keep me going. They're the reason I live. They're the joy of my life. And they're not what makes me crazy.
Yeah. Wow. Yeah, it's very powerful. And I also put in here just about healing. I like what you said, that, time doesn't heal all things. That a lot of us just think, oh, if I just sweep it under the rug, it's gone, it's going to be fine. And oh, if I wait, 5-10 years, I'll be great. And that's not the case.
Yes. Yeah, that's so true. And I was kind of just getting that message from other people too of, you've been given enough time. You should be over this by now. We can't put a time limit on anyone else's processing of grief or trauma. Everybody handles it in different ways. And even, you were also asking about family. Just my husband and I handled it very differently. It was a very different situation for him than it was for me. Right. For me, it was as if I had lost any of our other children, the same. For him, he wasn't as attached. It was more like he had read an obituary of someone he didn't know. We had just a very different reaction to that, but we need to give each other space to do that. Even among women, different. I've talked to other women who have had similar situations, and they didn't feel the way I did about it either. And that's okay. It's okay that we all grieve differently, that we all process it differently, that we all do it on different timelines. And I think we just need to have that allowance for each other and just comfort each other wherever we're at. Yeah. And, it's okay to be sad. It's okay to not be sad. And, just kind of work through those things and be authentic and honest, but not, thinking that other people need to match up the way that we think they should grieve or process.
Yeah. Yeah. I think so many people think there's a cookie cutter way to do everything. And, that's not the case, that it's going to be different for everybody. We all have different personalities and different ways of thinking. And it's just, taking that into effect for sure.
Yeah. Yeah. But I definitely think, just like if you have a broken bone and you don't set it,
right.
It will heal, but it's going to be crooked. And it's gonna continue to cause suffering as it goes on. But, if you can work through something emotionally, eventually I got Christian counseling, and that was so helpful to me. And we worked through some things, and I was able to get unstuck from that place that I was, where I kept reliving everything over and over. It was like I was constantly living in that place of grief, and I was able to deal with those memories and move on, and kind of, not that it's less painful, not that they're forgotten, but just that I'm not stuck with those feelings every day, because my brain was finally able to process them in a healthy way and heal from them. So that basically what was kind of an open bleeding wound is now a scar. It doesn't hurt if you poke it anymore. But for years, it was so painful, just any mention of anything would be a trigger and would set me off. And, I was a mess. So, I definitely believe we need more than just time.
Yeah.
We definitely need to be intentional about seeking healing, about getting help, about accepting help that is offered. And for me, it's an issue of pride, to say, hey, I'm not okay. I need help. And I think that's part of what held me back from getting help for so long. Part of it was I didn't know what to do. Part of it was, I thought I was abnormal. And so, when you're going through something, you think you're the only person that has ever gone through that. And that's never true. Right. And then, but part of it was this stigma with mental health, and particularly among Christian circles, and particularly in the military. Both are things where you don't want to highlight that you have a mental situation. So just, laying down the pride and saying, I need help, we need to do that in order to get healed properly or correctly, or otherwise it's just like that broken arm that's going to be crooked, until you fix it right. Right.
Yeah. How would you say that your Air Force experience helped you just with, going through all of that?
So I don't know that I would say help. I might say influenced, because my Air Force experience was, you just suck it up and press on no matter what. You just keep going. And I think in this case, that was actually not the healthy thing for me to do. And also, I think I mentioned that in my book, or maybe it was a blog post, of my growing up, I was a dancer, so it's all about you smile on stage, no matter how bad it hurts. So the show must go on and all these kinds of things. And then I go to the military where it's all about military bearing. And no matter what happens, you keep a straight face and you don't show any emotion. So those kind of two, and plus I'm just a private person. I'm just an introvert and whatever. But anyway, that was just kind of my natural response to life is I just smile and I go on and I pretend like everything's okay. And sometimes that's a helpful coping skill, in small things. But with a big thing like this and doing that for 5 years, that was not healthy for me at all. And I really needed to drop that mask and go, you know what? I'm messed up and I need help.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. And I feel like even just like forgiveness is huge in that too. I feel I didn't have a military background, but I did do the show choir and that all and things like that, where, if something goes wrong, you act like everything's just perfect.
You meant to do that.
Yeah, exactly. And so I know that, with all that forgiveness can also be difficult as well, because you just want to act like everything's good and, it's fine. I don't need to do that and move on. So how did you struggle with that?
Yeah, I did, with the medical community. Like I said, I think that was my biggest hurdle in forgiveness. And those were all strangers. It was nobody that I knew or interacted with regularly, but they just really unintentionally hurt me through that process. And then even, there was some disconnect, like I mentioned, with my husband and I, early on, I didn't understand that it's okay that we grieve differently. I wanted him to be upset like me, and that's not fair, so there was a sense of, I kind of remember Jesus, when like they're in the act of nailing him on the cross and he says, forgive them. They don't know what they're doing. And, I could argue, well, they knew exactly what they were doing. It was a fake trial. They're like nailing an innocent person. But in this case, I really, the medical people weren't trying to be mean to me. They weren't trying to hurt. They were just being professional and doing their thing. And they had no idea, the pain that caused me. They weren't thinking from that frame of mind. And, so just realizing, just being able to let go of the hurt and go, no, nobody's out to get me, and God's out to get me. God's not hating me because these people are treating me this way. It's just, I think for the most part, I mean, there are rare exceptions, but for the most part, most people do the best they can do with the resources they have in that time and place. And so we just need to give each other some grace, because none of us are perfect. I was doing the best I could in that, and I've learned so much. And I'm like, oh, I would totally go back and do that different. And other people around me too have learned a lot and said, oh, I wish I had done this or that. But that's life. We learn, and we have to move on. But also, and these are two other places, forgiving myself was a big thing. And there was never a medical reason that explained why my son passed away. So I thought of 1,000 ways it was my fault. That's kind of just that mommy guilt thing. Right. So even though I hadn't necessarily done anything wrong, there was that whole forgiving myself piece. And early on in the pregnancy, I was not really super excited about it. We were getting ready to move, and the baby was going to be born the same month we were moving. Oh, and I was just like, oh, and I had a bad attitude early on. And so I had just gotten to the point where I'd really embraced the pregnancy and really was excited about the baby. And then I felt like God took him from me. It was like this double surrender. And so I felt like, oh, maybe I didn't appreciate him early enough, and so God's punishing me for that. I had all these just messed up ideas about how God was out to get me and things like that. So I think that was a thing. And then this is going to sound really strange, but forgiving God, not that he needs my forgiveness and not that he does anything wrong, but I accused him of wrongdoing. I accused him of abandoning me, of not loving me. And so I needed to work through those emotions and kind of overcome that. So from my experience, it kind of feels like forgiving God, even though, scripturally, that's bad theology. He doesn't need forgiving, but I had to work through the hurt and the anger that I felt towards him.
Yeah. And I feel like I love that you brought that up, because I feel like so many people think, well, why do bad things happen in the world if God is so good? And I almost want to shake people sometimes. Like, it's because he gave us free will. Like he's not the little puppeteer making us, do all these things. Like, he gave us the free will to do what we want to do. So unfortunately, bad things are going to happen.
Yeah. Unfortunately, we do stupid things with our free will sometimes.
Yes. And I also love that you said that God is not uncomfortable with our questions.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like there's this taboo of, oh, don't question God. Or even as I was going through these struggles early on, and I would kind of start to go, well, what about, and people would go, oh, no, you don't question God. Like that's, and I'm like, but I have questions and I'm struggling to understand this. And so I kind of pulled away and tried to sort them out myself. But my thing now is take your questions to God, wrestle with him. It's not like he hasn't heard it before. He knows what we're thinking anyway. And he doesn't often even give us the answers, but he will comfort us. And I love the story of Job. There's all these questions and, all this consternation through 40 chapters, and then finally at the end, God shows up and he doesn't answer a single one of Job's questions about why he had suffered or what was going on. But at the end of it, Job's like, all right, you're God and I'm not, and I'm cool with that. And I kind of got to that place myself. I realized I actually don't want a God that I can understand. I want a God that I can trust even when I don't understand, because any God that's small enough for me to understand couldn't be any help to me. He wouldn't be worthy of my worship. I don't even understand myself. I don't understand my dog. How do I think that I could understand God,
Yeah.
So just the realization that the mystery of God is a good thing, that he's bigger than I can comprehend. And that's why he can help me. And just to learn to trust that his heart is for us. Even when we can't figure out the plan, we're like, why are you doing it that way? You're messing this up, God. I would totally do this better if I were in charge.
Right.
We get all that kind of goofball attitude. But just realizing to trust his heart, that I can look to the cross and see what he gave for me and know beyond any shadow of a doubt that he loves me. And even when life is painful and hard and confusing and crazy things are happening and I don't understand why, I can still trust in his love for me.
Yeah. Would you say that that's what gave you, a lot of hope during that time and just in life in general?
Yeah, I think it does now. Definitely. It took me a long time to get to that point. And I think that lack of hope is what just, I just kept sinking in depression. That's really, to me, that's what depression is when we lose our grip on hope.
Yeah.
We let go of it. And I just, I tell people all the time, I'm like, even if you cannot see it, there is always a reason to hope. And you just have to believe it's there, even though you can't see it. I know when I was feeling depressed, I had crazy thoughts. I look back on it now and I'm like, oh my goodness. And I really just think it was poisoned thinking, but I literally had thoughts like my family would be better off without me. Like I'm a burden to them. I'm not, and I look back on that now and go, what? No, my children need me. But I really believed that in that moment because my thinking was so poisoned. And so I think if we can recognize that we're in that place where we're struggling with hope and just know that even though it doesn't make sense to us now, but it, it won't always be like this, that it will get better. Things can change and that there is a reason to hope even when we don't see it. I think that can help us through those dark times when we don't see a reason to hope.
Yeah. How did you change your thinking going from, negative and toxic thinking to how you think now?
Yeah, that was huge for me. And really just kind of turning around how I was thinking about things. I love the verse about take every thought captive and make it obedient to Christ. And it was huge for me when I realized that just because a thought pops into my head doesn't mean it's true. And it doesn't mean it's earned the right to take up real estate in my head. And there's a lot of messages that we tell ourselves, they're on repeat in the background. A lot of times we're just not even aware of them because they've been such a part of our life for so long that's just kind of the wallpaper. Yeah. But we really need to pick those thoughts apart and examine them and go, is this true? Do I even actually believe this? Is this thought serving me? Is this what I would say to somebody I cared about? I don't know about you, but I know I talk to myself so much meaner than I would to my children or to a friend or to anyone I cared about. And we need to stop that. We need to treat ourselves the way we would treat someone else we care about. We are valuable and we are worthy of that. And so just taking those thoughts and examining them and kicking out the ones that are not in line with what I actually believe and replacing those with the truth. I would have a thought, everything that happened, every little thing, it was like, oh, this is confirmation that God doesn't love me. He's turned his back on me. He's angry with me. And just, to stop it and go, no, you're being ridiculous. God does love you. This is not evidence that God hates you. This is evidence that life doesn't always go smoothly. And just, let's deal with these little things. It's not like every little thing is God saying he's out to get you about something.
Mhm.
So that was just really huge for me. And then, as I dealt with all these doubts and questions, kind of turning it upside down, I had this filter where I was filtering what I was reading in my Bible through my life experience and saying, well, I don't feel like God loves me, therefore this scripture is not true. Or I don't feel like he was there to protect me, therefore I'm going to throw this verse out. But flipping that around, just like I said earlier, and going, okay, I know God's word is true. I know he loves me. Now let me filter my experience through that. Go, in light of the fact that God loves me and that he is all good and that he is all knowing and he is all powerful. Now, how do I process what I'm dealing with through that lens? And that was huge for me, because a lot of times it's not really as so much what we go through, it's how we interpret what we go through.
Yeah.
That determines it. Because you can see two different people go through very similar things and have very different outcomes. And it's because of how they interpret what happened and the experience that they had. So how we think about things is really, really critical to whether we're going to build that resiliency, whether we're going to own what's happened to us and our responsibility to deal with it in a productive way, or if we're just going to play the victim card and say, well, I can't help it, life's unfair and this thing happened and now I'm just doomed to fail for the rest of my life.
Right.
We've got to own that, even if it's not our responsibility, the thing that happened to us, even if it's not because of a bad choice we made or something. We have to own that, hey, this is my reality, and I need to deal with that, and I need to move on and heal the best that I'm able, and not use that as an excuse to be less than we are meant to be.
I feel like a lot of people, like, at least for me, years ago, I didn't even know I could control my thinking. I had no idea that was a choice.
Yeah, I didn't
Whatever
either.
popped in my head, that's what I got.
Yep. Yes, definitely. And I've talked about it with some other people too. It's funny what sticks in our head. It could be like some random comment somebody made in 8th grade.
Yep.
And I'm like, really? That's what I'm going to hang on to. I'm going to believe that word over who Jesus says I am. No, that's not serving me.
Yeah.
I need to get rid of that thought.
Yeah, I've seen people, and I'm sure I have too, just make huge life decisions off of something small that somebody said to them. It's just crazy how stuff sticks in there. And sometimes we just have random, commercials and songs in our head from 20 years ago. It's crazy.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, there's some things where, I've looked back on it and I'm like, why has that comment bothered me for so long? And then I'm like, that person didn't even know what, they were just saying something, it wasn't like this big moment of, I'm going to define who you are right now, but for whatever reason, our brains hang on to those things. And why we pick one statement over another, and why is it always like, it's usually a negative one, people said so many positive things over me, over my life, but it's like the negative ones that my brain sticks to. Why is that? I don't understand.
Yeah, it's almost like you could get 30 fantastic comments, and then you get one person who's mad, but the majority of people are not, but yet we hang on to that.
Yeah. My husband's really good about being optimistic and kind of, bouncing back from things and kind of going, I'm doing the right thing. I'm not going to worry about random comment that so-and-so said. And, so he'll say, just, it's like water off a duck's back, but I'm the opposite. It's like when people say positive things to me, that's water off a duck's back. But if somebody makes one little negative comment, or even they may not even mean it negative, but if I just imagine that it might be negative, that sticks to me like Velcro.
Yep.
So, and I think, part of that's just different brains, different personalities process things differently. And I tend to I'm like an emotional sponge. I tend to absorb negative energy around me. And so I just need to be aware of that and just be careful and say, no, that's not my burden to take on. It's okay to leave that over there with that person. And I'm going to go over here and do my thing. Yeah. And also realizing a lot of times when they do make negative comments to us, it's really not about us. It's more about what they're going through. Yep. They're having a bad day, or they've been triggered with something, or, different things are going on in their life. And a lot of times we take it personally, and it has nothing to do with us.
Right.
It's more to do with the pain that they're feeling.
Yeah. We're telling ourselves a story that's not even close to what they're thinking. Yeah. And I think even being a female, that's just, we probably over process and think things like that more so than the men do. So
yeah, definitely. I'm a big time overthinker.
Me too. Totally understand. One part that you talked about in the book that was sticking with me this whole week, and I thought, well, this is probably one main thing I need to take away from it is that our enemy is not in the physical.
Mhm.
That I see and hear these things, and I know the world's kind of crazy right now.
Yeah.
And it's almost like I'm vilifying the people that are saying it, and I've had to stop myself, like, no, this is the
Mhm.
enemy, this is the devil, working through these people.
Right.
And that's something that it's just so easy to get caught up and be mad at people that it's probably not even their fault in the end.
Yeah, and I wrote that years ago, but I'm like, that has been so applicable the last 2 years or so, just with everything that's going on in the world and in America in particular, and just the way people drop sides on things. And I'm just keep reminding people, people and circumstances are never our real enemy. So one way to kind of think of this, like, let's say my husband and I get in an argument about something, we disagree on something. He's not my enemy. The
Right.
enemy is whatever might try to tear down or hurt or break down our marriage, right?
Mhm.
It's us together against the enemy. It's not me versus him. And having that mindset is just so helpful when you're going into a situation where you don't see eye to eye with another person.
Yeah.
To just go, they're not my enemy. Keeping this relationship healthy and godly is the goal, not me winning some argument. And you can win the battle and lose the war. It's kind
Right.
of a comment that we use a lot. Like, you can win that argument, but how much damage did you do to the relationship by winning that? But my husband and I, even because we both understand this concept, and so sometimes we're like, I have an enemy and it's not you. I
Yes.
don't recommend saying that to just anybody. It has to be somebody else who's on the same mindset as you. But
Right.
I'm like, you're not my enemy. We're on the same team and the enemy's over there.
Yep.
But that's so helpful when you really grasp that to work through things with other people.
Yeah. I've seen that so much just with, I mean, I feel like there's a side for everything, and it's just to try to divide everybody and cause
Hmm.
more issues within families, within spouses, and all of that. And that the enemy is definitely working very hard right now. And we need to
Hmm.
realize, other people are not our enemy.
Right. And I feel like there's this thing going around these days of like, oh, if I disagree with you, then we can't be friends. And I'm like, well,
Yeah, it's
where
crazy.
does that idea come from? We can agree on big, important things and still get along and have a good time together. I don't even agree with myself on everything. I argue with myself in my head. And we don't have to see it all the same way.
Right.
It's fine. So let's
Exactly.
just get along and move on.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about it, if everybody thought the same, looked the same, did all the same things, it'd be really boring.
Yeah, it
Be
would.
a pretty bland and boring world. So I'm,
Yeah.
I'm glad we all are different in our own way.
Hmm.
Another thing that you had said I thought was very interesting. Peace requires action. Can you expand on that?
Yeah, I think so I'm like a peace keeper, I guess. Maybe, I don't like conflict, and so I avoid it. Or, like you were saying earlier, just smile and move on. Try to hide it. Kind of just, everything's okay. We're just going to move on. But that issue doesn't go away, and it like piles up. And so as a conflict avoider, I'll avoid it, and then I have this big pile that I can't ignore anymore, and then I go blah.
Yep.
And I spew it all out. So it's been very helpful to me to learn that really true peace is about, kind of working through things and working these things out, in a mature, in a godly and a loving way, not like going at it with conflict and whatever. But as we work through those things, we get to a real peace, not this fake peace. It's a peacemaker versus a
Mhm.
peacekeeper.
Yeah.
That's based more on truth. And even I'll use again the example of my husband, because we communicate a lot about a lot of things. But there's been so many times where like he'll say something and I think, oh, I signed some idea that he had to that. But then when we go back and talk about it, he's like, that wasn't what I was thinking at all. I was thinking this other thing. And then I'm like, oh, okay, well, yeah, that was a good thought. It wasn't out to get me like I thought he was, or, being rude or whatever. He was looking at it a totally different way. And he was doing a good thing in a different perspective than
Yeah.
mine. And I'm like, oh, okay. So if we just talk about that sooner, and work that out and go, oh, I didn't mean that at all, then we can have that true peace. And I think too, this also is true with God. I was kind of at war with God for a long time because I wasn't working it out with him. I was turning my back, like I said, and trying to work out the problems on my own. But when we drag our doubt to God, when we take our questions to him and work through those things, then we can get to that place where we have genuine peace.
Yeah, absolutely. And I just feel like that's just so important that I just see so many people just try to shove things away, and we have to deal with our stuff. And I just think
yes,
yeah,
we do.
Very, very important. And you talked a lot about diminishing doubt, and you had 4 steps with it. Could you expand on that?
Yeah, I don't know if I remember the exact 4 steps that are in there, but I think acknowledging that we have it. And we kind of have touched on this already, but just trying to go, nope, I believe everything just like it's written. And, sometimes it's like, we don't want to be like the girl that said the emperor has no clothes on, or, whatever. We don't want to admit that we have doubts about God. And I think we would all be served a lot better if we could just come honestly to God and to each other and say, hey, I don't really get this. And, in the book there, I have several examples of people who questioned God in scripture, and he received their questions. There's a difference, I think, between like a mocking question of, of God where we have a wrong heart attitude toward him, or one where we're just like, I just don't really get that. I don't understand that, And so there's lots of examples where God accepted people who were doubting and asking questions, and he didn't necessarily give them the answer they wanted.
Right.
But he loved on them and he received them. And so I think just acknowledging them, and then, like I said, taking them to God, rather than squirreling off in the corner by ourselves. I think being a part of a community where we can all be open and be authentic. There's a lot of, unfortunately, Christian circles where you can't be authentic, where it would be really weird and awkward if you said, hey, I'm having this doubt about God, or, does he really, they'd be like, blasphemy. Everybody scoot their chairs back and wait for the lightning to strike you. And so we just need to find those communities where it's okay to be real, and it's okay to say, look, this is my reality. And, this is what the Bible says. And how do I reconcile these two? Because I really didn't have a place that I felt was safe to say those things out loud. So it was all going on in my head. And that was part of what led to my unhealthy thinking. I don't know if I hit all 4 of those.
Yeah.
Did I leave one out?
Accept, expose, share, and surrender. So I think you did.
Okay.
Yeah. That's
cool.
Awesome. So and I feel like you've definitely experienced a bunch of hope, healing, and peace in your life. And that, that's one of the main things that we want to bring to people. And what would be, if you can narrow it down to maybe just 1 or 2 things that you would want to leave our audience with, as they listen today?
Yeah, I think, and I've kind of already touched on it, but just admitting that we need help and asking for it, I think is very important. And sometimes it takes more than one go at it. If you're having a physical thing, you may have to go to more than one doctor. I had to go to more than one counselor before I found somebody who was a good fit. When I started taking an antidepressant, I had to try a couple of different things before, it's not always the first thing you're going to try is going to be the one that helps.
Right.
And so there's some persistence involved in there. If you seek help and it doesn't work out the very first time, don't go, okay, well, see, I told you that wouldn't work. We have to try again. We have to take what we learned from that and go at it again, because I believe God wants us to be healed and whole and hopeful. He wants that for us. And if we're seeking that, he will help us get there. It's not always going to be a straight line from point A to point B. For whatever reason, God likes to take us on the scenic route a lot of times. It's not just, we go right there, because he's got other things he wants to show us that we don't even realize we need to learn. So I would say just be patient with that process. God certainly can heal any of us in an instant. And there are plenty of examples of that happening. And I prayed for that and I begged God for that. And that just wasn't my story. God wanted me to own it. And God wanted me to walk through some steps and work with him towards my own healing. And that took a lot of perseverance and determination. It took courage to say, I need help. It takes courage to go into that office of the place that you've never been and, do a new experience that you've never dealt with before and never thought, oh, I never thought this would be me sitting here in this office. But I think, just trusting God and wanting that same wholeness for yourself that he wants for you, and being willing to go after it and get it.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, that's awesome. I really appreciate your time today. And I thought your book, Undefeated, was amazing. If people want to find out more about you, where would you send them?
My website is elizabethmeyers.me, and that's kind of the central hub of all the things I'm doing and connects to various things. My podcast is Resilient Life Hacks, and so you can get to it from that website, or you can go to resilientlifehacks.com. And I have guests on each week that kind of share their story of something they've overcome, and what kind of life hacks or doable things that we can all learn from. Because I think even though we all have very different stories, there's always things that we can relate to with each other. When we share those personal stories, I've talked to so many different people, but every time when we sit down and share stories, I'm like, oh, I get that part. I get that piece of your story, or at least I can, empathize with that a little, even if I haven't gone through all that stuff. And so I think we have a lot that we can learn from each other when we share those things.
Awesome. Well, and I will put all that in the show notes so you can check it out. And please share this message. Please subscribe. Please rate and review us. And until next time, own your life, because your life is your responsibility.
Thank you all for listening. If this added value to you, please click subscribe and rate and review us. You can also find us at Own Your Life Co. on Instagram and Facebook, and ownyourlifeco.com. And as always, own your life, because your life is your responsibility.